Now, I'm very happy to welcome to the Odds Breakers for the very first time a man who I'm a big fan of and been following a very long time in this industry, all the way from Calgary, Canada. We have Mr. Adam Chernoff from covers.com. You can follow him on Twitter at Adam Chernoff. Adam, thanks so much for coming on the show. I enjoy all of your shows at Covers. Love the consensus show. You also do the halftime shows during the Monday night and Thursday games. So thank you for coming on. It's such a joy to have you on finally.
I'm looking forward to talking week 11. The season is disappearing in a hurry on us.
I know. It's crazy how fast it goes, man. College is about over and the NFL hangs around, especially now it's a little bit longer, thank goodness. I guess that for us, that we have that extra 17th game this year. Probably a little more stress for the Circus Survivor entries coming on. Not that last week wasn't bad enough on them, but no, it's still trucking along here, and then everything just completely turns into college basketball afterwards. But either way, really happy to have you. You've done so many great things for the public on all your chat channels and things like that, and so welcome and really excited to get into this slate with you, man. So how is life up by Calgary? Isn't that the main city you're close to?
Yeah, I'm about 30 minutes northwest, kind of in the middle of nowhere. Small town guy, and was in the city, but have since moved out in the last year and a bit. And we got the snow settling in yesterday. It was kind of flirting with us a little bit, showing up, then it was getting warm, but now the cold has settled in, so we're pretty well locked in until early April now.
There's no. I'm sure. I know those days being in Wisconsin. I mean, I'm sure it would hit Calgary first, that cold front coming in from the Arctic, and then it would not warm up one bit and go through Wisconsin, and that was always painful, man. Going through the cold days of winter, and it was like after Christmas, that's when it really slowed down. And, you kind of enjoy it a little bit, and then you're like, okay, January, okay, February, and then you're like, seriously, March, seriously. Give me some good weather, but those days are long gone for me, man.
It's the toughest when it's 4 p.m. in the middle of December and you look outside and it's dark, and you wake up and it's 7:30 in the morning and it's still dark, and you're like, what's going on here? Like it wasn't a big thing growing up, but now it's a lot to take on.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I want to be a snowbird. But I'm not ready for that yet. Maybe one of these days it's going to be like 2 or 3 months up in the North Woods, but just a little bit, and then a little bit of ocean, and then back here to Arizona or Las Vegas area is fantastic for me. So that's the plan in the long run. But I did take a look at your city. I'm 1,228 miles away. I can get there in 22 hours. And 3 minutes, my man. A lot of mountains through Utah, though, if I wanted to drive it. So
I save it till June.
Yeah. I'm gonna save that drive for a little while. Maybe grab a Harley Davidson later, and we'll check it out one of these days. But anyways, we have a lot to talk about, and one of the biggest changes that I want to get your input on, Adam, is the Carolina Panthers, man. I'll tell you, this team, I was all excited in the beginning of the season. I just thought, man, this team can be really good. But, Sam Darnold, he has to be better with Matt Rule. I bet them plus 275 to make the playoffs. And then you saw the fake Carolina play against the bad teams, and then you kind of see what they really are. And you just see how bad Sam Darnold is. But now, they come in and they catch Arizona off guard. I mean, P.J. Walker didn't have to do anything. It was the defense, really. And then now they have Cam Newton that's kind of hyping the team up. He's back, man. What does this mean? I'm trying to figure it out, because I always thought Cam wasn't a great quarterback. I mean, after his first couple of years anyway, I just thought he kind of turned into maybe somebody that just didn't put as much thought into it as other quarterbacks. But at the same time, he really seems motivated now. Is this something that's sustainable? Do you think they're a play-on team? How much do you upgrade Carolina with Cam on the team, Adam?
I didn't upgrade him a lot, and I don't know really what to expect here, because the last year nobody wanted any part of Cam Newton when he was in New England. Like it was terrible. And it's a case now where he's obviously a year older. It's hard to imagine that his on-field ability has improved any, but there's this kind of layer of hype and excitement within the locker room and just like the general buzz around the team with him returning to Carolina that I don't really know how to value or if it matters or if it's a 1 week thing. But it's noticeable because every person that covers the team or writes for them or is a beat reporter or anything, all they can talk about is how different it feels within the locker room with Cam Newton and his presence out there. And so how long does it take to get acclimated into Joe Brady's offense? I don't know. Does it change a lot? Is this still an offense that fully runs through McCaffrey? They have playmakers that you think would be ideal to pair with Cam, but I just don't know. It's a weird spot, but we're sure seeing this number. It's going up in a hurry. We're already through the 3. So it's been no shortage of people back in Carolina so far.
Yeah. And I was sitting out this one. I think favorites are best to bet late, especially during COVID. I was sitting out for a while. I haven't made a complete decision yet, but at 3.5, I was hoping for some contrarian money to hit on Washington just because Carolina's not a blowout type team. They're based on defense. You have no idea what you're going to get from Cam. And at least Washington had some offense last week, but they took a massive hit with Chase Young out and obviously Montez Sweat. But we'll get to that game. But so what I'm doing, I'm going to at least for the short term give them a bump, and maybe I can get myself to the window with Carolina. But in the meantime, I think this is something that could go great for them for a while, and then possibly even crash on them. So we'll see how that goes. But we have a mutual friend, and I think everyone knows Las Vegas Chris, and I got into a little discussion with him this morning on Tennessee. And here's the thing, and I got it from Chris, but I'm not even disagreeing that Tennessee's overrated. I think compared to the market and what the public thinks in Tennessee, I do think they're somewhat overrated. I mean, I'm looking at these power ratings on SAGRID. They're in like the top 5, and Ed Fang's power ratings, he's like top 5. He's top 8 in team rankings, But I have Tennessee 9, okay, and I thought I was okay, before I talked to Chris. They have them at 9 because of the way they show up against big teams, blah blah blah. But at the same time, I think they're that team that isn't exactly what they've been doing. But man, he's showing me DVOA and they got him 18 and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, hold on a second. Hold on. So 18's a little bit low, even, and I do respect DVOA at Football Outsiders, but I'm gonna ask you, where's your mind on where Tennessee should be compared to the rest of the NFL?
I have them 13th, and I think I'm high on them. I question whether or not without Henry, without Julio, this is better than an average football team in the league right now. Vrabel is getting Coach of the Year comments. 5 weeks ago, we were killing the guy for
When he lost
the
the Jets.
decisions he was making. Like mid-October, they lost to the Jets, and they rattle off these 4 games as underdogs against Indianapolis, Kansas City, Buffalo. They beat the Rams. But now, I mean, it's so different. You take Henry out of the equation, and now you remove Julio. The last 2 games, they've combined for 350 yards total. They've been outgained the last 2 games by a little over 200 yards. They had against LA the pick at the 2-yard line, which led to a 2-yard touchdown drive. They had the pick 6. Against New Orleans, the Saints were making mistakes left and right, and that's a team in New Orleans that is an interesting team to talk about the rating in and of itself. But like the Titans are a team with a quarterback that lives and dies off play action, 1 wide receiver, an offensive line that's among the worst in pass blocking grades. And for the first time in 4 to 5 years, a defense that actually plays up somewhat relative to the level of the defensive head coach that they've had, that has been this defensive genius despite having a defense that ranked bottom 4 in the league the last 3 seasons. And so it's flipped. We always criticize Tennessee for their defense, and now we're like, their defense is great, but offensive play is much more predictive. And so they keep winning games especially without Henry and Julio, with very unusual box scores. And I think it's a very different story than these last couple of seasons where it was getting by on their offense despite their defense. Now it's getting by with their defense despite their offense. And that's just not something I think is going to hold out long term.
That's not something sustainable, right? Yeah, I mean, I think that they're kind of catching those good teams at in opportune times. I mean, look what LA did last week too. I mean, the Rams look terrible. I mean, they look bad against the Niners, and every team goes through those lulls, and maybe Tennessee's catching them. I do agree with you for sure, but the deal with my power rings, the reason I have them 9 is just because I don't think highly of anybody. Very few teams I do, and I think all of them are kind of around that Tennessee area, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, but that's how weird the season has been. Like KC started way up, and then it was like an unbelievable drop. And then Buffalo was up, and then it was an unbelievable drop. And then Denver was up, and it was an unbelievable drop. And then Baltimore was up, and it was a huge drop. Like Tennessee's up. We're waiting for everybody has gone on this little 3 to 4 week run that we thought was the best team in football. And then there's just been a bizarre result coming on the back end of it. And no team of this sort of conversation for who's the best in the AFC has anywhere close to the injury issues that Tennessee is now dealing with. And I would say if you think about those other teams, New England, Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo, all these top teams in the AFC, we have far fewer questions about the sustainability of their offense than we do at Tennessee. And in a league like this where that really matters, to me, that's what makes it stand out.
I agree with you, but I also think that maybe the Henry injury, if he's coming back for the playoffs, is a blessing in disguise because they have the easiest schedule coming out here now, and they're in the playoffs. I mean, it's very simple to say that, were they 8-2, something like that. And then Julio's coming back week 14, or he's eligible to come off IR in week 14. So maybe this is like something that happens. I've seen it happen with the Packers before. They got healthy right in the playoffs and won the Super Bowl in 2011, 12, whatever. It happened with the Giants before it. Who knows? But I think there's going to be a time to go against Tennessee, and I'm real excited to see if this is the week. So we'll get to that game here.
I'll say one thing. If we get any production out of either of those guys the rest of the season, I will be shocked because Julio now both of his hamstrings are shot. He's going to need surgery at some point. He's questionable every week at best, and that foot injury for Henry, that's not something the guys come back from in a hurry. And like the wear on his body is to an extent we've never seen from a running back before. I get the optimism from Titans fans, but I'd be shocked if we get either of them out doing anything again this year.
All right. Well, let's see if we can find the time to go against Tennessee, but let's get started with this slate of games here. And basically, if you have a comment, great. If we can pass on some of these games too, I already have a couple thinking in my mind. I'm going to pass, but we're going to take a look at the Thursday night game real quick. Adam, New England versus Atlanta here. The spread last time I looked, and I'll actually go get an updated one right now, I believe was about 7. I think some books were dealing 6.5. And so it's between that. The total's around 47.5. Rotation 311, 312. Thursday night football. Do you have any thoughts on this game and this pretty big spread?
It's Atlanta or nothing, but I haven't bet it. I don't know if it ultimately gets back to like a true 7 here. The Patterson news is going to have a big impact on that. I still don't fully understand how he's practicing. Like there were reports Sunday evening, Monday morning that were suggesting he was like a firm out 2 to 3 weeks. And then 4 hours later, they're like, wow, he's at practice. What happened? But he's absolutely enormous to this team with no Ridley. If you take him out of the equation, we've already seen prop money come pretty heavily on the different Titans receivers, Pitts, other guys that have come heavily on the under, just assuming that Patterson's not going to play. The Pats are very good at covering tight ends. They're also very good at scheming away the best option for opponents. So that kind of makes it tricky for this Falcons offense. But from just a number perspective, this is an awfully big price now getting into the market once you get to like a true 7. But there's definitely some injury concerns that outweigh that.
Most definitely, and I think New England's a vastly improved team from week 1, 2, 3. I looked at the matchup here, and if you're counting all the stats, I don't see a massive advantage. I mean, the Patriots rank 8th in rush EPA, right? The Falcons rank 7th in opponent rush EPA. New England they're kind of like an average passing team, but that's where they can maybe do some damage. Atlanta ranks only 29th in opponent dropback EPA. Some of the advanced metrics I like to look at, but here's the thing for New England. I mean, are they looking ahead to Tennessee here? I mean, you got a Mike Vrabel that used to play with Belichick, obviously. They probably are somewhat friends, I imagine, and I'm sure Belichick wants to win this game a lot. I'm expecting a flat spot at some point for New England. New England does have a 0.8 net yard per play advantage, but I don't think that constitute a home dog of 6.5 or 7. So I get what you're saying about Cordero Patterson. He's been amazing for this team. And, that's what you do. Any ex-Bear that leaves Nagy turns into a good player. So keep that in mind. That's how bad Nagy's been for my Chicago Bears. But my power ratings really have this a pretty high spread at around -9. But I think that it'd be Atlanta for me or nothing else, Adam.
I'm with you.
Let's move on to the next one then. Detroit versus Cleveland. And I'm seeing 11.5 now. Cleveland money coming in. Geez, totals at 43. I mean, when you see 11.5 and you see a total of 43, you're like, Jesus, what's it going to take? Detroit not scoring at all. Everyone's looking at this as a big get up spot for the Browns. I think some people are thinking the Lions are in that, oh my God, we had our chance to win and blew it type thing. The field goal kicker missed the field goal, blah, blah, blah. But that's always just speculation to me. I guess really quick, I'll just give you my thoughts. I think that it's a get up spot for Cleveland, sure, after that performance, but Baker Mayfield looks rattled. And to be honest with you, what I've seen from Baker Mayfield, I am not sure, Adam, that he's better than Case Keenum. I'm not. And I think that he's a lot like Case Keenum if he doesn't get all erratic and whipping the ball all over, throwing interceptions. Now, Cleveland does have a 1.8 net yard per play advantage over Detroit. So they can do it when healthy. I expect Chubb back. My power ratings actually have this at -11.5, but my metrics algorithm has it at -8. So I think a flat 10 is more fair for me, but I'm not sure if I'm getting involved, Adam.
Cleveland or nothing, but another game I didn't bet. But Mayfield's just not healthy. Like he's just contract season. He's trying to prove things, and like I get it. I think Keenum's probably. He looked a little bit better on that short week on Thursday than he probably is. There's the familiarity with the Stefanski offense from his time in Minnesota. And this is a run-first team that was taking on the Broncos that had 6 guys out in their front 7 and all their linebackers injured. So it kind of set up well for whoever was in the backfield, and that kind of aided him through there. But I think the big QB issue is on the other side. Not because I think Jared Goff is anything good whatsoever, but because he may ultimately not be on the field, and you're going to get either Blau or Boyle in this game, which, like, it's tough to think that there's a downgrade from Jared Goff, but there probably is. And we saw that news come out today, and immediately Circa moved 2 full points. That was taken back the other way. I think people were just looking at that as too big a number, regardless who's under center for Detroit, for this Browns offense to cover. But there's too many questions at quarterback for me to really be certain about anything. And like you mentioned, there's still injury issues with Chubb, who really matters to this team. So it's just a messy game. I'd lean Cleveland or nothing, because I think Detroit's is even worse than what we're sort of getting for them. But this is becoming a pretty big number.
It sure is. And what's really the downgrade of Jared Goff? I don't know.
It has to be something, because Blau or Boyle against the pass rush like Cleveland there's nothing good about that situation.
There's nothing good about that. All right. Sounds good. Let's move on to the next game real quick. We have The San Francisco 49ers at Jacksonville. It's funny. This thing kind of went up to 7 after that Monday night performance, and now it's got it back to 6. I think it's back to where it should be, possibly even lower. My pure numbers have this game, I think, around 5. I have this is a 5-point spread, so I'm considering a play on Jacksonville now. Not in a rush to bet Jacksonville. If anybody's in a rush to bet Jacksonville, they're probably Jacksonville fans. So I don't recommend anybody try to bet on Urban Meyer real quick, but because anything can happen in COVID and everything. But the Niners, they're 12th in EPA per play on offense and 19th on defense. For some reason, DVOA seems to like the 49ers a lot. They have them in their top 7, and I look at the Niners as they blow a lot of opportunities. I think Jimmy G, not the quarterback that's going to take you above, but he's a very good game manager if he's not turning the ball over. Jacksonville's terrible efficiency and turnovers, but I mean, they're a little bit better than people think. They're 8th in pressure rate, 26th in EPA per play on offense, and 28th on defense. That's not in the 31-32. I mean, I probably might, for a contest, I might have to pick Jacksonville because I don't think I'm going to have 5 sides anyway this week. But that's my thoughts on it. I'm going to lean Jacksonville.
And I'm not a Jacksonville fan, but as soon as 7 showed up yesterday, I bet that at a few different places, and I know a few other people that jumped on it as well. That's too big of a number, and I'm not opposed to the Jags money line either. I think this, from a couple different perspectives, is a tough spot for the Niners. So you get the short week, going cross country, have to now play in Florida, which we've seen affect. It always has some impact on teams, but we saw what impact it had on Baltimore last week. We've seen that happen to Buffalo earlier in the season. It's something that matters, I think, especially for San Francisco. So short week, that's the case. This is a Niners team that doesn't overly trust Garoppolo with the ball in his hands. Ran it 40-plus times against the Rams on Monday Night Football in a game that really saved their season. This team lives and dies off of the run, and so does their offensive success and rhythm. The one spot that the Jags are actually a decent football team is defending the run. They're above average, and they've played a pretty difficult schedule of opposing run offenses in a lot of games where they were trailing by a ton. So when you look at it down-to-down perspective, even in those spots where opponents were heavy run favored just due to game state, they were still doing very well. So I think the Jags can defend the run, but then you start to see some injuries creep in for the Niners. So Eli Mitchell, starting running back, he had to go into surgery yesterday to get a pin put in his hand. Don't know if he's ultimately going to play, but anytime you're getting surgery midweek, it's not usually a good sign. Deebo Samuel seems to always be hurt, but he's one of the toughest guys in the league. But he has now dealing with the calf issue on one leg and the shin issue on the other leg. So potentially he's less than 100%. But again, you put him in this environment, and that tends to sort of lead to more cramping and potential issues too. So I think the Niners are going to have to pretty drastically change their game plan from what we saw work on Monday Night Football. I think it's a tough travel spot. I think it's a spot where some of the key contributors from Monday now banged up, and it's a tough spot off of a season-saving win against that coaching rivalry between Shanahan and McVay, which means so much to him. I think it's just a bit of a tough spot for them to cover this big of a number on the road.
Letdown spot, travel spot. Do greedy, foolish people such as myself that didn't take the minus 115 on the plus 7 get another shot at this number?
If it's there, it'll be there very quickly. But we saw this right around 4.5 or 5 on the look ahead. And it was going to be influenced by that decision either way. If the Niners win, this was always going to 7. If they were losing, this was going back towards 3.5. So they get the result going their way. This one went way up, and the market said, no, that's too high. And so now that we've sort of seen that happen, I don't know if it happens again unless there's some Jags injury news that comes up.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I missed out on that one. And, I was kind of like, oh, it's getting good. 7 minus 120. And like, all right, I'm going to get a flat 7. I think I got busy. Next time I looked, it was gone. So that's what happens sometimes. Pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Let's move on to the next one. And we have the Indianapolis Colts at the Buffalo Bills. And Adam, I'll be honest with you. I did take Buffalo in the openers Monday morning ish, -6.5. Now it's kind of like a juiced -7. I felt the line move coming here just on Indianapolis's bad defense, but I mean, Buffalo's had their bad spots. They just had an easy win against the Jets, and it was easy. But the reason that I like Buffalo here, and I would take it at flat 7, is because of the matchup here. I mean, the way to beat Buffalo is to stop the pass. Now, the Colts are the best, I think, top 3 in rush EPA, but they get smoked with the pass. And the Buffalo's kind of like they're not a power team anymore. They're a finesse team. They're throwing the ball. They got Josh Allen. He's running when he, through the pocket. Obviously, he does that plenty of times nowadays. But they can't hand it off for the life of them. As a matter of fact, Moss and Singletary haven't done anything this year. But the way they're beating people is super strong defense, which gets to Wentz, and that would get Wentz flustered. And when Wentz is flustered, he's throwing the ball like this at the end zone line. And I expect a little bit of that. But Bills number 4 in dropback EPA, Colts 24 in dropback EPA. I mean, Xavier Rhodes is banged up. Isaiah Rodgers, listen, is questionable. They might not play. I think I'm pretty safe here, but what are your thoughts?
Not much for me here. Allen throughout his career has been much worse against zone coverages that the Colts tend to play at a pretty high rate than he has been against man. Does that matter? It could a little bit, but really not too sure here what to make of the difference between these two teams. How much you're factoring home field. If you give them a point and a half, then you're probably looking at Buffalo 5.5 points better, which is not entirely unreasonable. Wentz, he had his second child this week. So how much is that going to impact things? He was back at home and dealing with his wife and everything on Monday and into Tuesday morning. So it kind of threw off the week a little bit, but not too sure what to make of this game. It's a pass for me.
All right, there you go. Passing on this. And I will say the Colts definitely were undervalued for a long time this year. So that was a nice couple wins if you got on top of the Colts. And I think you and Chris probably did that. Let's move on to the next game. We have Miami versus the New York Jets.
This is a pass if I've ever seen one. Joe Flacco starting. I can't help you here if you want to preview it.
Is he worse than Wilson?
Well, okay. So apparently Wilson's still hurt. So I don't know what they're going to how they're going to handle him or what the situation is there. But like I'm looking at this and saying, if you're this organization, you have to figure something out at the quarterback position. The answer is never Joe Flacco long term. That's not happening.
No, never.
You've got 2 other options that can work.
Super Bowl MVP Joe Flacco, remember, Adam?
18th all time in passing yards. He's ahead of Joe Montana.
There you go.
I don't know. I don't know what they're trying to get from it. And it's a game that if Wilson was starting and this is 3.5, I'm intrigued. The other way with Flacco, I have no idea.
I mean, what a terrible spot to bet Miami. I don't care about extra rest after you just beat Baltimore, but you know what Miami's going to do? They're going to just do the same thing they did against Baltimore. They're going to blitz the hell out of them and stay contained. Now, the question is, are the Jets smart enough to actually run a quick slant because frickin' Harbaugh wasn't? I mean, are they smart enough to run a tight end through the middle? It's a little stunt through the middle to stop the blitz. I didn't see any of that. I have no idea how bad or why the Ravens were so outcoached in this game. And I'm not sure if Lamar Jackson had an opportunity to figure this out. It was just consistent beating down. Miami's going to do that. When it worked that well for you, they do it the next week. The question is, can the Jets figure that out? I mean, can Salah? I don't know how much faith I have in Salah, but I will say that I will be intrigued at 3.5, and I think he gets there. Okay. I will be intrigued by that number. Miami's a bad team. And like Chris says, when bad teams play bad teams, you take over 3 points. It's just a good way of playing. And Miami ranks 27th in EPA per play. The Jets rank 28th. Miami's a little bit better on defense, but this is a home game for the Jets. The Jets looked terrible last week, which is a buy spot. Tua is going to play. Yeah, let's just pass well, we talked enough about it, but
passing along. Yeah, that was a lot of chatting for a pass.
That's a lot of chat for a pass for sure, man. All right, next game, Washington versus Carolina here. Now, I'm gonna let you go first on this one. I think the spread is 3.5. You said it might have just got hit. I think it gets to 4. If you like 3.5, you might want to grab it because there's gonna be some Cam Newton hype coming in. I'm seeing 3.5 plus 100, so maybe I'm getting a contrarian side here. Total's really low, 43. What are your thoughts?
I think 3.5 now is too high. I would love a 4. There's unfortunately a little bit before we came on a group that I know that came in and took Washington, and so that's kind of moving back the other way now. So that's kind of sticking in there. So I don't know if that's a bit of a roadblock for where this moves, but could be a case where on the weekend it touches 4. But he's been around with the team since last Friday. So this is going to be day 9 with the Panthers. I get it's Newton returning and it's the same city and it's the same team, but this is a completely different coach, a completely different offensive coordinator, a completely different system. To me, McCaffrey returning has much more of an impact than Newton will short term. Like we saw the impact that McCaffrey had against the Cardinals last week. That matters, I think, much more than what Newton can potentially bring to this team. We didn't see it last year ever. I don't know what changes now that he's a year older within an offense that he's completely unfamiliar with. And last year in New England, yeah, they didn't have weapons, but that team was constructed from a roster perspective exactly how Newton had it in 2015 during his MVP season in Carolina with the big targets, the tight ends, the running game behind them. Everything was set up for him in the exact same way, and nothing happened. And now it's very different. It's speed, wide receivers. It's a lot of horizontal back and forth. I don't know. I think it's too quick. I think the number's too high. I'm trying to figure out when the best time to bet Washington is.
All right. And here's where I would disagree with your statement. Now, I 100% agree that it's Joe Brady's playbook with Matt Rule. That he won't adjust to that quick. And I also have to wonder if PJ Walker is going to play just like he did last week, and they put Cam Newton in a little bit. I know he's taking a lot of first team reps, but not sure. You know, I have no confirmation about that. No one's going to say anything about that, I don't think, except Matt Rule. Yeah. So here's where the intangibles come into this game. I think just the fact that Cam Newton's presence is going to make this team try a little bit harder. I think that's there. And I think that Washington doesn't know who to prep for. I don't think they know what to prep for necessarily. I know that their coached Cam Newton, but at the same time, completely different offense. PJ Walker, you know that if Cam gets in there, maybe does some of those goal line plays, he's going to be extra motivated to kind of show the guy that cut him, you know, that he's the man. The other intangible is this might be the biggest letdown spot of Washington's career after taking out the Super Bowl champs last week. And now that you lost Chase Young, I mean, I think McLaurin's banged up a little bit. Without Sweat, I don't see how they're going to get a good pass rush here. I think the McCaffrey part of it's pretty big too. Now, Carolina does have a 0.4 net yard per play advantage, but Washington's had the harder schedule. I still have this a 6-point spread, so I'm probably going to play Carolina. I just haven't yet. So hopefully the syndicates can push this down a little bit farther for me.
It's tipping back towards 3, definitely.
All right. Well, I'll keep an eye on that, and maybe I won't be quite as greedy as I was with the with the other line that we talked about in Jacksonville. Let's move on to the next game: Baltimore versus Chicago. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm a Bears fan, of course, and I mean, you would have thought this is a great spot for the Bears, but what the hell? Now Baltimore's coming off that ugly loss. It would have been a perfect spot to bet the Bears, but as you can see, there's some contrarian money hitting the Bears. I mean, it's 5.5 in the last man standing contest. You know, that I'm curious where Circa is going to open this one. I think they might be asking for Baltimore money. I think you might see a 5.5 with Circa. Baltimore's not as good as they bet. Their running backs are suspect. Their offensive line is freaking terrible, as you saw. I think the motivation's there. They can stop the run. but they're terrible against the pass. This is probably the worst Baltimore team I've seen since Lamar Jackson era. My question is, can the Bears beat the blitz? Because the Baltimore is one of the most blitzing teams out there. Matt Nagy's a very bad coach, but I think Bill Lazor, with one extra week, should be able to scheme a little bit and figure out how to use Justin Fields. I really like what I saw from Justin Fields in the second half in that awful Tony Correnti game a couple weeks ago. Jesus. But I think the spread's a little too fat, but I'm not sure if I have the cojones. I have Baltimore 25.5 to 21, 4.5 point spread.
So Lamar Jackson is at home with an illness. It's allegedly not COVID related. That has taken the game off the board at a handful of places, but also just checking timestamps. Like, it was a direct move from 6 to 4.5 at some places that really matter. So it wasn't likely a bet just because it was the full 1.5 move within seconds. So that's kind of my interpretation of this, and whether or not that is assuming things further down or it's just a potential sort of mini free roll opportunity where people took the 6, seeing it not ever threaten going to 7 and saying, well, if he's in, I like the Bears at 6 as it was. If he's out and this is more than just an illness, or he misses a week of practice and the Ravens get downgraded slightly, well, I have the secondary key number of 6 in my pocket, and this is a game that's going to close shorter. I don't know which one of those two it ultimately is, but kind of a similar matchup for Fields in the Bears offense, in the sense that he's going to face a lot of pressure, get a lot of blitzes, and he's going to have a secondary that has one true lockdown corner. The Ravens have Humphrey. But other than that, he's going to have potential for the same plays downfield like he had against Pittsburgh. So the Ravens defense, to me, is kind of that unit that stands out, especially in the secondary. It's always so good, but lately it hasn't been anywhere near the level that we're seeing, kind of to what you were saying. So I don't know, because if Lamar doesn't play, this is going to be a massive move. If he's limited or he misses tomorrow or however the situation plays out, it's going to impact this certainly. So I don't know if we're getting back to like a full 6 anytime, but we're kind of maybe going to sit in this dead zone. It's not a game I'm going to be betting, but that's kind of, I think, what's going on with the line.
I think Lamar had COVID recently too, so he's got the flu. Maybe we have to assume something like that. And
that's not my place to get into.
Yeah, we're not doctors, but it's fun to speculate.
Who knows?
This happened to Lamar earlier this year. He missed another week of practice because he was sick, and then I think we also saw it. But then he played and did really well. Can't remember which game that was, but Lamar's not that guy that needs a ton of practice. I really don't think that they scheme all that much over there. It's just very strange. I mean, just seeing them not adjust last week against Miami, but I do see that line, and you're right. I should have looked at the updated lines. I do see it at 4.5, and total is 45 at them. I'm not getting involved either in that price. I do think that if Lamar plays, this will pop back at 6. So if you wanted the Bears, you probably should wait or pass.
Wait or pass, yeah.
All right, let's move on to the next game. Then we have the New Orleans Saints at the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm seeing a 1. It was 1.5. I see a 1. Looks like a little Saints money came in. Total's 43. And maybe this one is so for teaser protection. I don't know. But what I do know is that I can't stand this game, and I'm passing it because I can't figure out the freaking Eagles for the life of me. And if anything, I'm going to tease the Saints up to 7.5 in a different book. Any thoughts, Adam?
A couple things. So as we've been talking, the screen lit up and the Eagles got bet. They're now up to 2 or 2.5 at some key spots. What I will say about this game is there have been 2 different groups with a ton of influence in the market. One of them has bet the Eagles every single week for about 6 weeks now. It started with the Tampa Bay game. It's
our Euro group.
Every week they've just been smashing the Eagles.
Yep.
And it's been significant movement, like multiple points. There's another group that's in the States that has bet the Saints every single week. They started week 1 and they've been doing it every week. A couple weeks, not as much influence, but they've been driving a lot of money behind the Saints. I think we just saw the Eagles come in. I don't have my phone next to me, so I'm not entirely sure. This would fall in line with kind of the time of week that they have been betting this team. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was happening. I think there'll be a back and forth going on, and at some point we'll see Saints money, and I think it's just kind of stuck in this dead zone. From a matchup perspective, the interesting thing is since week 8, the Eagles are number 1 overall in the league for offensive categories. That's all been driven by their run game. Their run rate has gone through the roof. When you think about what New Orleans does well, they're the best team in the league defending the run. So the Saints give up a ton of explosive plays behind them. The Eagles have had a very explosive pass game the last 3 to 4 weeks, but that's all been predicated by the run. Mm-hmm. And so if they can't run on the Saints, it'll be the first time we've seen them sort of unsuccessful to do so on the ground in about a month and a half. Is that passing game still there? Against the Broncos, they threw twice the entire second half. They were just running all over the Broncos, who had no linebackers on the field again. I think that looks very different against the Saints, but do you trust the Saints enough to shut down Smith and prevent those explosive plays behind them? If Miles Sanders is back, he's eligible to return from IR, that would be a significant difference for the Eagles, but it probably encourages them to run as much as they have been the last few weeks. So it's a very interesting difference in game plan, potentially, that we're going to see. But when the Eagles take as much money as they have every single one of these weeks and get as much movement as they have, it's not a spot as much as I might want to just sort of willingly go against it. But I don't think that I can back the Eagles in this spot. Again, I've been on them a couple of weeks and done well with them, but I look at this on-field matchup and I'm like, I can't get there.
I don't think Sanders is any better than Howard or Scott personally. I don't.
Strong disagreement.
Well, to be honest with you, Jordan Howard's been running really tough. And the fact that they are using both of them, one is usually fresh, So you might be right, but I've seen Sanders run plenty of times, and maybe I'm just not impressed. I don't know, but it's okay. I mean, we've been agreeing on most of this stuff anyway. But
I didn't expect Miles Sanders to be the point of initial disagreement on the podcast.
Maybe not, and I didn't either. I just think that he's as good as them. But I will say that maybe this is an under bet for me. I mean, it's at 43. It's still pretty low, but I did win on the under 22 last week. That the Tennessee threatened a little bit, but I still got that. And your first half under is 21. So maybe push at it, but I can see myself getting an under here. I think you're right. The Saints do stop the run extremely well. And I think the reason that people like these teams so much is that their efficiency, yards per point, is both really good. Sean Payton's always fantastic on offense and defensive yards per point. He's just a very efficient coach.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about Kamara. He was on the practice field today. He was running around doing drills. I don't know if that's an indication of him potentially being able to go. But the way that the Eagles defense plays with Jonathan Gannon as their DC concedes the highest opposing quarterback completion rate in the NFL. It's north of 75%. They concede everything underneath. Right. When you think about how the Saints want to move the football with Kamara healthy, that sets up so well for what they do. But if he's not out there, that, again, you're looking at a Saints offense in terms of weapons without him, it's the worst in football, arguably. And as bad as the Eagles defense looks and as good as they let opposing quarterbacks be, like Trevor Siemian, it's a tough bet when you're not getting really any points in your corner.
It really is. They did backdoor to get that cover too.
Huge backdoor. Yep.
And you wonder if the game was closer, if that touchdown would have been allowed by the other team, but who knows? Let's move on to the next game. Houston versus Tennessee. And I'm excited to talk about this because for everything you said about Tennessee, I'm maybe halfway expecting at least a lean to Houston here from you, Adam. So the spread is it 10.5? No, it's 10. I see a flat 10. Looks like Houston got hit. 44.5 the total.
I bet Houston 10.5 last night at 7 p.m. officially. So took them kind of what I said about Tennessee. They had their big run as underdogs last week. There was zero support for them as a 3-point favorite against the Saints, who we just talked about. So, like, if you really want sort of the market barometer for where the Titans should rank, if you have the Saints probably average in general, I'm saying anyone listening, and you're getting the Titans at home as a field goal favorite against them, not getting any support, kind of puts them in the same class, right? So say we call Tennessee average or slightly above. You're looking at this and saying the difference between an average team in the NFL and let's call Houston the worst is 10 points. We're not giving much for Tennessee home field within the division, especially. I don't think it's that big. The Texans have been semi-competitive with Taylor in the 10 quarters that he's been on the field this season. And again, like, this is a lot of points, in my opinion, for the Titans to cover when it's down to Tannehill and Brown and a couple running backs nobody's really heard of, and a wide receiver group that's 3 or 4 deep with replacement level guys at best. So I get Houston's terrible, but putting the Titans and this offense especially in a spot where they have to cover double digits is just so different from where we've seen them this year, and I think it's just gone a bit too far.
All right, and that's a great breakdown. And the thing about this game, this is a bad spot for the Titans. It could be a flat spot, but then you look, and it's also a division game. Do they care? I mean, they already beat the Colts twice. I have to ask myself those questions. But another question I have to ask myself is, I mean, next to Dan Campbell, the Texans have been put in the worst spot to succeed this whole year. And their coach, man, I'm curious. They got their win. Do they care? It's hard to handicap that, but I can also see them just being completely dead in this game too. So probably passing on this one. But I'm rooting for you. We'll see what happens. I think that it's going to prove you guys right for sure against all those power ratings, buddy.
We need the Texans to be proven.
You're relying on you and Chris are relying on the Texans this week. All right, man. What a fantastic.
Yeah, to this point, I've bet 2 games, and it's 2 teams from the AFC South, not named Indianapolis or Tennessee. So it's just, this week is going to be just a ton of fun.
That's amazing. I love it. Let's move on to the next game. Packers versus Vikings. 2 is the number that I'm seeing for the most part. This total's at 49. And I'm just going to tell you right now, I haven't done that good in totals this year. I was fantastic in totals in the NFL last year. It really saved my season. But this year, my totals haven't been good. But what I will say is this is the total that I'm off the most on. I don't know what it is, but the Packers defense seems to really tighten up on the plus side of the field. I always looked at the Packers defense as being underrated this year. And I know that they're missing some guys, and now Gary's kind of hurt-ish. I think he's going to play. They just lost Whitney Merciless. But at the same time, this is a division game. The Packers lost Aaron Jones on offense. I like the under in this game because my number is literally 43 points. It's that far off. And I was kind of surprised. And I'm like, okay, well, Danielle Hunter is out for Minnesota, their pass rusher. They expect kind of a quarterback duo in this game. Plus, it's in a dome, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, Green Bay, offensive EPA 7th to Vikings 17th. Vikings love to blow it in the red zone, and they've been choking at the end of games. I can see this being like a running matchup here. I don't know if they're going to put too much on their quarterbacks here. Packers are a little bit banged up on the offensive line. They should get Bakhtiari back. I think the Packers are a better team than the Vikings, and it sounds like that if you lined up the Vikings versus Tennessee on a neutral field, you probably bet the Vikings, wouldn't you, Adam, against the Titans on a neutral field. So, but a lot of people have different thoughts. Like I'm lower on the Vikings than Tennessee. You're lower on Tennessee than the Vikings. Both teams have issues. So I'm just going to stick with the under because I have it about close to pick them anyway. I have the Minnesota win 22-21. What are your thoughts?
So debated the under, ultimately elected to bet the Vikings this morning at 2.5. Couple things cooking here. Rodgers has a toe injury that's not getting, I don't think, enough press. that's bothering him a little bit. He sat out today due to exhaustion, which apparently came over from the whole COVID situation that he was dealing with, which we've seen limit quarterbacks that have got it recently in season this year and last. So I think there's something going on there. You have the Packers now progressing without Aaron Jones. This will be their first game without him. How long he's going to be out, it's kind of up in the air. Is anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks is the rumor, but he's not going to be there. So they're now down to AJ Dillon, but they signed another running back off the street earlier this week. So it's maybe a bit of a tall expectation to think Dillon's going to be there every snap. Their defense, like you mentioned, has been playing really well. And the reason it's been working is because this defense is last year and this year has been really suspect to play action. And anytime teams have used play action against them, it has really killed their pass rush and put their defensive backs in a bit of a tough situation. And so what they've done to sort of counteract that is sit with two safeties really deep and play this two deep shell style that's worked the last couple of weeks against Seattle, worked against Kansas City. It's been really working in their favor. Where I see that a little bit problematic against Minnesota is if you have two safeties deep, and this team in general plays a lot of dime coverage with smaller defensive backs on the field because they value speed more than they value physicality, matched up against the Minnesota Vikings, it kind of eliminates that issue we have with betting Minnesota all the time of how conservative they get in close games. Minnesota continuously plays to one-score games because when they're leading, they go very run-heavy. And when they're trailing, they have this phenomenal passing game, but they're unable to sort of utilize it in optimal situations to have their offense moving downfield. When you think about this Green Bay defense, so if they just line up as they have been with two safeties deep, well, then Minnesota, when they go conservative and run the football, they're going to have success running it with Dalvin Cook because that's the optimal defense you want to face if you're running the football. If those safeties come up, that sort of brings back into the equation the same issue of, well, when the safeties play tight, they're sort of suspect to play action. If those safeties come up, then you have Thielen and Jefferson you have to deal with a very good play action quarterback in Kirk Cousins. So last year in that second game when these two teams played, Minnesota went off with Cook because the Packers tried to sit deep with a lot of defensive backs, and Cook ran for like 170 yards. And so I think it's just a really tough matchup for the Packers defensively, where I'm usually reluctant to bet Minnesota, but I don't think that Zimmer and his tendencies can really go wrong in this game. And if the Vikings offense really sputters, I think it's kind of turnover driven, which you can't predict. You can't bet on that. But if you're just assuming that it's just a normal game for Minnesota, I think their offense does really well. And if it gets put on the Packers, you have Rodgers that maybe isn't 100%. You're without Aaron Jones, who's a huge part to this offense. Kind of like the points here.
No, great breakdown. It sounds to me like Packers are going to be playing cover 2 against the Vikings with their safeties deep. So makes sense. I know they do have a new defensive coordinator, but all within the same nature of what they've been doing before. I think they just promoted the guy under him. I can't remember his name offhand, but play action. That's interesting. The Packers are very susceptible to play action. So I'll keep that in mind. That's a fantastic breakdown. So I'm going to lean with Minnesota because I have them winning the game anyway. And if you're pretty convinced someone's going to win the game and it's under 3, most of the time it's going to land at 3 anyway or more. So I don't feel any problem with you taking. You took points too. You took 2.5.
I did.
So,
yeah.
so that's fantastic. I agree with you on that. But now it's definitely moved towards your favor, Adam. But I'll stick with my under 49. Maybe we both hit this one. Let's move on to the next one. We got Cincinnati at the Raiders here. This thing is stuck around the pick'em. I mean, I guess I saw the Bengals -1.5 in a couple books this morning. Total's pretty high at 49.5. I'll tell you right now, Adam, the Raiders have been my nemesis when it comes to sports betting. When I fade them, they win. For whatever reason, whatever team, when I'm on them, they lose. I can't get them, but I also can't stay away from them. I feel like I have to pick a bet on the Raiders game.
Can't live with them, can't live without them.
I think that's what I'm feeling. I think the spot's better for Cincinnati coming off the bye. Cincinnati is not as bad as what you saw against the Jets in Cleveland. There was that pick six that swung the score 14 points in Cleveland. Cleveland is a much better team when they're winning because they can run Chubb. When they're losing, they can't catch up to anybody. So Cincinnati, in my opinion, is better set up for this position in this game. Now, the Raiders, they play out of their minds. They beat the Eagles by 11 points at home. But now with the Ruggs thing, obviously they lost their cornerback. The coach, that's got to start wearing on them at some point. Derek Carr looked like a deer in the headlights last week, man. He looked scared, and their defense did not make any adjustments against Kansas City. They're running zone against on every single third down against Kansas City, just getting completely beat bad using their zone. And I just think give them a couple different looks, but man, I think Cincinnati wins this game. I'm going to have a little play on them. What are your thoughts?
I'm not betting the Raiders, but I have yet to bet Cincinnati. Agree with a lot of what you said. This offense has looked really different without that presence of Ruggs on the field. You take away that speed, and it kind of just condenses things a little bit, and we haven't really seen them be able to get away from it. But the Raiders in general, it's a below average roster with a no-name head coach and a quarterback that really lost the benefit of having those strong game plans from Gruden week after week after week. Say what you will about Gruden and how he handles things and who he is, but he is a phenomenal offensive game planner on a weekly basis. And I think that now is really starting to have an effect on this team, especially when you remove your top wide receiver from the equation. And so you get as much as you do from Renfro he's a phenomenal route runner, but he's not the guy that's going to threaten safeties deep downfield on a play-by-play basis. And so people are just kind of sitting a little bit tighter and making it really difficult on the Raiders the last couple of weeks. So I don't know. It's a tough spot for me either way, but I'm not looking to back the Raiders at this spot at this price for sure.
Yeah, and I also I don't like the total either, so I'll stay away from that. We have a few minutes left, so anything on the Arizona-Seattle, all I'm going to say is I almost feel like this is a free roll. I think that this should be higher with Murray, and I think Murray plays. So, I mean, I took a position on Arizona, and I've somewhat regretted it because I'm thinking, why would they play Murray when they can just rest him through the bye? But at the same time, they have that ugly loss against Carolina. And Seattle is my Tennessee this year, Adam. For you, the way you look at Tennessee, it might be the way I look at Seattle, except I have Seattle lower. I have Seattle in my lower 20s. So I don't have a problem playing Arizona here. Any quick thoughts?
No Hopkins at practice. Murray's status still uncertain. Is Russ healthy? I have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know. Too many questions for me.
All right, too many questions. Let's move on to Dallas, Kansas City. This is probably the biggest. Well, this is the biggest game of the week. Let's not kid ourselves here. Dallas, I mean, way better than I thought coming in this season. Now that they had that big stomping game against the Falcons last week, Kansas City seemed to get it right. But I'll tell you right now, this is 2.5. And it's 2.5 because everybody knows that Dallas is a better, well-rounded team than Kansas City. If you look at the full team, Dallas is better. But Kansas City has a better coach, and they have Mahomes. I mean, they have the wild cards, right? Now, I'm curious if I get a 3. I think there might be some 3s. I see -2.5, -115 on the Kansas City. I'll be a player at Dallas at 3. What about you?
Okay, a couple things I have here, and I'll be completely frank that I have nothing whatsoever on the Sunday night and the Monday night football game. So if this may be the sort of worthwhile spending a couple extra minutes here on a game people are really going to want to get into. So the Cowboys with Michael Gallup back last week, they had him back for the first time since week 1 against Tampa Bay. And I could look at the Cowboys schedule and point to week 1 and last week being far and away the best games this offense has played all season. I think Gallup matters to this offense far more than it is being made out to be, because it takes a lot off Cooper and it frees up Lamb, especially from the slot, to be able to push himself downfield. This is a very hard defense to defend. When you match him up against Kansas City, like, I can't help but think this is just way too much for this secondary to take on. And the Chiefs defense has improved dramatically the last month of games, really since that Buffalo game. Against the Bills, that was the first time that they got a few of the key guys back. But now, like, this defense is fully healthy. And I think it's much better than people are ultimately giving it credit for. But I just don't know how we're going to really get that great of a game out of the Chiefs defense against this Cowboys offense that now, with those 3 wide receivers, I don't think there's a defense in the league that can match up one-on-one with some help on 1 or 2. Like, it's a nightmare with Gallup back in there. And that's not bringing into question Pollard and Zeke out of the backfield, who against this Chiefs, like, if you have these 3 wide receivers effectively pushing safeties downfield, opening up space, like, those are 2 very good runners against a very decent offensive line. So to me, this is like a really bad spot for the KC defense. I would sort of want to look to the over, and my hesitance there is that there's been a very clear way to give Kansas City a little bit of trouble, and that is sit in the 2 deep shell and force everything underneath. For the first time all season, last week, we saw Kansas City take what they were given underneath, stay patient, and do it effectively all game long. And we saw the Raiders kind of cave late, where they got a little bit antsy. And they said, okay, we can't stop this having 2 guys deep. We got to start taking some chances. As soon as they took chances, they were getting burned deep. Trayvon Diggs gambles more than any defensive back in the NFL, and it's not even close. And this entire secondary takes on that mentality. If you look at just his straight cover stats, he's second worst in the NFL for coverage and passer rate allowed on these snaps. But we give him so much credit because he has like 8 interceptions now. It is entirely boom or bust from Diggs. And so when I look at this matchup, Kansas City is going to be forced to score because I think the Cowboys are going to put up points. If we get this Dallas secondary that is taking on this gambling mentality, as we've seen a couple times this season, Dallas is going to lose this game by double digits, and Kansas City is going to explode offensively. If it's a case where the Cowboys get the lead and the Dallas defense, specifically within the secondary, plays within itself and is patient, it's going to be a much slower moving game. And this total, even if Kansas City is effective at moving the football underneath, is going to be about 10 to 12 points too high. I don't know how it's ultimately going to play out, which is why I haven't bet anything. Like, there's nothing that I'm seeing coming out of coaches' quotes, press conferences. There's just no hints at anything. I think there's so much boom or bust potential for the Chiefs offense against this gambling Cowboys defense. If they play it that way, that like it's just keeping me off everything all around, but I'm going to be very interested to see it. But for me, that's 100% the matchup here. Like you don't adjust against Kansas City. You let them take it, and then you punish them when they don't. And it's worked for weeks. The Raiders went away from it. I think the Cowboys might ultimately go away from it too, but I have nothing concrete to act on, so I'm staying away.
Yeah, great breakdown. I think that Diggs feeds off of their pass rush a little bit. And they're not the greatest pass rushing team, only middle in pressure rate, but if they're getting to the quarterback, Diggs is jumping routes and he's completely blowing it. If the quarterback's got a little extra time to throw the ball, I think that's what we're all seeing with Diggs. My problem is Dallas, are they going to sit in zone? Are they going to let Kansas City just kind of pick them apart like that? They will be playing over the top, like you said. And then if that's the case, they're going to be inching away chunks of 5 yards to Kelsey, chunks of 8 yards to Tyreek Hill, things like that. And they're going to move the ball. One thing I do see is I don't think the Cowboys will get blown out this game. I think there is a chance Kansas City could, just based upon how well Dallas's defense is playing that. I don't see Dallas not scoring. I see that there's a chance that Kansas City doesn't score more than anything. Dallas is a lot better than some of those teams that Kansas City has struggled against. So that's why I'm leading Dallas. But I also, like you said, Kansas City's starting to show better, right? They got Frank Clark's back. I mean, right? It's just
and it's interesting. So I have a lot of respect for the guys in the back room at Circa, Jeff, Matt, Chris, Glenn. They're just awesome at what they do. Some of the best bookmaking minds out there. Following the Buffalo loss, so KC was, like, top of my head, they closed 3 or 3.5 in that game against Buffalo. And I put out a thing on Twitter and I was like, if this game was played again, what would the line be if you had to make a price for the same hypothetical matchup? And people were like, Buffalo -4, -6. Like, it was way the other side after that snap outcome. People always overreact. And the guys from Circuit chimed in. They said they make it KC 2.5. Now, we're 3 or 4 weeks removed from that game. We've seen Kansas City struggle a couple times. They've lost a couple more games. Like, I get it that it changes, right? The fact remains, this week we saw the prices open everywhere. There was 1.5s out there. There were 2. Circa has been high on KC the entire week. They've been at 2.5 and they haven't moved. Everywhere else has been fluctuating back and forth. A bit of an interesting spot there off the Sunday night game, where we're at a spot now where some of the best bookmakers in the world went higher on KC than the market and just have kind of been sitting there. And everywhere else has been kind of bouncing back and forth. It's a strong opinion to take in the market. On the other hand, there's other bookmakers, one of certain who I won't name drop because they say they're sort of competitors, but they have a big website that's nationally used across the states. And they very much look the other way. And so they were down on the opposite side of it, setting the market and sort of taking a lean towards Dallas themselves, kind of encouraging that KC money. So it's right now where the Chiefs stand. It's a very sort of divisive team, how they're being treated from a point spread perspective, how they're being treated from a futures perspective. And really, for the first time, like, I don't get the sense that Dallas is inflated on a side this week for probably the first time since week 1 against the Buccaneers, where that line went to 10 after opening like 6.5. So, like, I feel it's a bit of a resettling, and I question whether that win against the Raiders, who we just talked about, are sort of going in the wrong direction. Like, was that enough to say that those couple weeks were just kind of an anomaly for the Chiefs, where they were really struggling to move the football? I don't know, but it's a very interesting market dilemma that's kind of shaping up right now.
What I will say is that if they did lose to the Raiders, Dallas would be favored by 3 to 3.5 points, in my opinion here. I think that's much of a swing. I personally believe that. That's big. But
yeah, because it was coming off of, like, they beat the Packers barely, but there was no support for them at all before that Raiders game. Like, there were books coming out saying this is the first time we've needed the Chiefs in years. And it's like, it was weird to see that, but I think you're right that it would have been on the other side of 0 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have 1 minute, then I have to run to the bus stop. So we'll do one more game. The Chargers Steelers, obviously we can pass because Minkah Fitzpatrick, we don't know a lot about Ben Roethlisberger.
Everyone's out.
But I'm going to tell you this, Adam. This is my Circa consensus pick for the week. I think everyone is going to jump on Chargers. I know Bosa's got some COVID problems. I think he was just in the room. I'm not sure if he tested positive of their defensive tackle, but after that Pittsburgh game last week, I think people are going to jump on the Chargers, saying this is a big get-up spot for the Chargers. That's just my opinion. I think it's going to be the consensus number 1. Anything real quick?
Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. Potentially, I could say that maybe there. I was going to say that Tennessee might get a ton of support, as well as San Francisco, but probably not more than the Chargers. The Chargers have been top 5 like 3 of the last 4 weeks. They keep getting bet a ton. They were top 5 against Philly, and they rewarded everyone. So I think people will go back to them. I think you're spot on with that.
All right. Well, fantastic. I can't wait to hear your show, The Consensus Plays, with you and Chris, and we'll see where this one ranks up, man. Thanks so much for coming on, Adam. Where could our viewers and listeners get your great information?
Yeah, just on Twitter at my name, Adam Chernoff. You can follow me there, and I tweet stuff out all the time around bets and betting, and some people find it entertaining, so you might too.
Many people do, including myself. Thanks so much, Adam. Really appreciate your time, man.